Ambassador Kethra had never known true fear until the sky turned black with harvester ships. She stood on the balcony of her crystal tower in the capital city of Valana Prime, watching as thousands of dark vessels descended through the clouds like a swarm of hungry insects. Her bioluminescent skin flickered with pale blue terror as the first explosions rocked the distant mountains. The Valani were a peaceful species, evolved on a gentle world of soft light and warm waters. They had never developed weapons of war because they had never needed them. Their entire civilization was built on empathy, art, and the sharing of emotions through their glowing skin. They were beautiful and fragile, and now they were dying. "Ambassador, we must evacuate you immediately," her aide Thorneville shouted over the screaming alarms. Kethra watched as harvester landing pods crashed into the city below. She could feel the terror of millions of her people washing over her empathic senses like a tidal wave of pure agony. Children were screaming, parents were running, and everywhere the harvesters marched forward with their terrible harvesting machines. The harvesters were not truly alive in the way the Concord species understood life. They were a biomechanical swarm, part organic and part machine, driven by a single overwhelming hunger. They did not conquer worlds for territory or resources in the traditional sense. They consumed entire populations, rendering living beings into biological fuel for their endless expansion. "The Concord fleet?" Kethra demanded, her voice breaking. "Destroyed," Thorneville replied, his own skin flashing with grief. 14 battleships gone in less than an hour. "The Concord has abandoned us. They say the defense of Valana Prime is impossible." Kethra felt something shift inside her chest. It was not just fear anymore, but something harder and colder. It was the determination of someone who had nothing left to lose. "There is one place we have not asked for help," she whispered. Thorneville's skin turned white with shock. "You cannot mean, Ambassador. The quarantine exists for a reason. The humans are monsters. The Concord has kept them isolated for 3,000 cycles because they are too dangerous to be allowed among civilized species. And what good has civilization done us today?" Kethra demanded, gesturing at the burning city below. "The civilized species of the Concord have abandoned us to die. Perhaps it is time to ask the monsters." She pushed past her aide and ran toward the emergency hangar. Behind her, the screams of her people echoed through the crystal corridors. Harvester soldiers were already breaching the outer walls of the government complex. The lightship was small and fast, designed for diplomatic missions across the galaxy. Kethra had piloted it many times to peaceful conferences and trade negotiations. Now she would use it to break the oldest law in galactic history. As she lifted off, she looked down at her burning world one last time. Millions of lights flickered below, not the lights of the city, but the bioluminescent glow of her people dying. Each flash was a life ending, a soul crying out in its final moment. Kethra wept as she pushed the ship toward the stars. The journey to the Sol system took 3 days at maximum speed. During that time, Kethra monitored the communications from her homeworld. The news grew worse with every passing hour. Cities fell one by one. The harvester consumption centers processed thousands of Valani every minute. Her species was being eaten alive. On the second day, she received a final message from Thorneville. His skin was dim, his voice weak. "Ambassador, do not blame yourself for what you are about to do. If there is even a small chance that the humans might help, it is worth the risk. We will likely be gone by the time you return, but perhaps some of us will survive. Perhaps some Valani colonies will endure because of your courage. Go with light, old friend." The signal cut off, and Kethra knew she would never hear from Thorneville again. On the third day, she crossed into the Forbidden Zone. Warning beacons screamed at her in a dozen languages, telling her to turn back, warning her of the dangers ahead. She ignored them all. What could humans do to her that was worse than what the harvesters had already done to her world? Earth appeared on her view screen, and despite everything, Kethra gasped at its beauty. It was a blue and green jewel hanging in the darkness, swirled with white clouds and glittering with lights on its night side. This was the homeworld of monsters. She opened all communication channels and began to transmit. Her message was simple because she had no strength left for complicated words. "Please," she said, her voice raw with exhaustion and grief. "My name is Kethra, and I am the ambassador of the Vellani people. Our world is being destroyed by the harvester swarm. The Galactic Concord has abandoned us. Billions of my people are dying as I speak these words. I know that your species has been isolated and feared for thousands of years. I know that the galaxy has called you monsters and locked you away, but I have nowhere else to turn. If there is any mercy in you, any compassion at all, please help us. We are dying, and you are our last hope." She sent the message again and again, in every frequency, in every language her ship's database contained. Then she sat back and waited. One day passed with no response. Kethra began to lose hope. Perhaps the humans truly were the mindless beasts the Concord claimed. Perhaps they could not even understand her message. 2 days passed, and Kethra stopped eating. What was the point of survival if her entire species was gone? On the 3rd day, a signal returned. Kethra's hands trembled as she activated the communication screen. The voice that came through was deep and rough, speaking Galactic Common with a strange accent. "Vellani vessel, this is Admiral Helena Vance of the United Earth Defense Fleet. We received your transmission. We have seen what the harvesters are doing to your people." Kethra held her breath, waiting for the rejection, waiting for the humans to laugh at her desperation. Instead, the human admiral spoke words that would change the galaxy forever. "Send us the coordinates of your homeworld. Tell us everything you know about these harvesters, their numbers, their weapons, their weaknesses. We are mobilizing our fleet as we speak. Hold on, Ambassador. Help is coming." Kethra broke down in tears. She had come to beg monsters for mercy, and the monsters had answered with compassion. As she transmitted the coordinates with shaking hands, she wondered what kind of creatures these humans truly were. The galaxy had feared them for 3,000 years, but in her darkest hour, they were the only ones who had offered hope. Whatever happened next, the universe would never be the same. Admiral Helena Vance stood before the emergency session of the United Nations Security Council, a gray uniform crisp and her eyes hard as iron. Behind her, the massive screen displayed the footage that had arrived with the alien ambassador's message. The room was silent as world leaders watched cities burn. They saw creatures that looked almost like glowing angels running through streets filled with smoke and fire. They saw children being dragged toward massive machines that processed living beings into fuel. They saw an entire civilization being eaten alive. "This footage is 3 days old," Vance said, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "By now, the situation is certainly worse. The Vellani people are facing extinction at the hands of something called the Harvester Swarm." President Chen of China spoke first. "And why should this concern Earth? We have our own problems. We have never met these aliens. We owe them nothing." "With respect, Mr. President," Vance replied, "we owe them everything. For 3,000 years, the galaxy has treated humanity like dangerous animals. They have kept us locked in our solar system, afraid of what we might do if we were released. Now, for the first time, someone has reached out to us not with fear but with hope. They have asked us for help. What we do next will define humanity's place in the universe forever." Prime Minister Williams of Britain leaned forward. "You speak of military intervention against a force that has destroyed entire civilizations. What makes you think we can succeed where others have failed? Vance smiled, and it was not a pleasant smile. Because we are exactly what the galaxy has always feared we are. She pressed a button, and the screen changed to show the United Earth Defense Fleet. Massive warships hung in orbit around Mars, their hulls bristling with weapons. The fleet had been built in secret over the past 50 years, funded by every nation on Earth, designed to protect humanity against the hostile universe everyone knew was waiting. 62 battleships, Vance said. 300 destroyers. Over 2,000 fighter craft. And 400,000 soldiers trained for zero-gravity combat. We have never used these weapons in war. We have never needed to. But we are ready. The Secretary General of the United Nations, a gray-haired woman named Amara Okonkwo, stood up slowly. Admiral, you are asking us to send our children into a war that is not our own. You are asking us to risk everything for strangers. I am asking you to be human, Vance replied simply. I am asking you to look at those images and feel what every person in this room is feeling right now. Anger, horror, and the overwhelming need to do something. That is what makes us different from the rest of the galaxy. They look at suffering and calculate the cost of intervention. We look at suffering and cannot turn away. A young analyst in the back of the room spoke up, his voice trembling. They look like us. The way they hold their children, the way they run from danger. They are just like us. That simple statement changed everything. The vote was not unanimous, but it was overwhelming. 47 nations voted to authorize military intervention. The dissenting votes came from fear, not cruelty, and even those leaders wept as they cast them. Within hours, the mobilization began. Across Earth, soldiers received emergency orders. They kissed their families goodbye and boarded transport ships that would take them to the fleet. Many of them knew they might never return. None of them hesitated. In the shipyards of Mars, engineers worked around the clock to prepare the fleet for departure. Weapon systems were tested, ammunition was loaded, and medical bays were stocked for mass casualties. Everyone knew this battle would not be easy. Admiral Vance boarded her flagship, the USS Defiance, and took her place on the bridge. Around her, officers from a dozen nations worked together with perfect coordination. Humanity had always been fractured by borders and politics, but in this moment, they were one people with one purpose. Admiral, all ships report ready for departure, Commander Jackson reported. He was a tall man with dark skin and kind eyes, and he had served under Vance for 15 years. Open a channel to the fleet, Vance ordered. The communication screen flickered to life, showing the faces of captains and crews across all 62 battleships. They were young and old, men and women, every race and nation of Earth represented. They were afraid, but they were also determined. Soldiers of Earth, Vance began. For 3,000 years, the galaxy has called us monsters. They have quarantined our world, told stories of our savagery, and warned their children about the terrible humans of Soul. Today, we prove them right. She paused, letting her words sink in. We are monsters, she continued. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day. We survived ice ages and plagues and predators in each other. We learned to fight before we learned to speak. Violence is written into our very genes. And the galaxy was right to fear us. Her voice grew stronger, filling with fierce pride. But what the galaxy never understood is that we are also something else. We are the species that runs toward danger when others run away. We are the species that builds hospitals in war zones. We are the species that cannot watch innocents suffer without acting. We are monsters, yes, but we are monsters who protect the weak. The crew of the Defiance began to cheer, and Vance could hear the cheering spreading across the fleet. Today, we travel to a world we have never seen to save a people we have never met. We will face an enemy that has never known defeat. Many of us will not return home. But when the history of the galaxy is written, it will record that when the Villani begged for mercy, the monsters of Earth answered. She raised her fist in the air. All ships engage faster than light drives. Destination: Villana Prime. Let the galaxy tremble, for humanity goes to war. The fleet surged forward into the darkness between stars, and the universe would never be the same. In her private quarters later that night, Admiral Vance allowed herself a moment of doubt. She looked at the photograph on her desk, her daughter, her grandchildren, the family she might never see again. She thought about the 18-year-old soldiers sleeping in the bunks below, kids who had never seen real combat. Are we doing the right thing? She whispered to the empty room. She thought about the footage of Villani children being dragged toward harvesting machines. She thought about the desperation in Ambassador Kethra's voice. She thought about what kind of species humanity wanted to be. Yes, she answered herself. This is exactly who we are supposed to be. She turned off the light and tried to sleep. In 3 days, they would arrive at Villana Prime. In 3 days, the monsters of Earth would show the galaxy what human warfare truly looked like. And somewhere in the dark between stars, the harvester swarm continued its feast, completely unaware that death was coming for them at the speed of light. The harvester overmind had consumed 117 worlds across 10,000 cycles of existence. It had rendered 12 species completely extinct and absorbed billions of living beings into its ever-growing biomass. It had never known defeat, never experienced fear, never encountered a predator greater than itself. When the human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel on the edge of the Villana system, the Overmind analyzed the newcomers with cold efficiency. Its sensors detected 62 capital ships of unknown design, accompanied by hundreds of smaller vessels. The biological signatures indicated bipedal carbon-based life forms with an average lifespan of less than 100 cycles. The Overmind calculated a 94% probability of total victory. These creatures were small, fragile, and short-lived. Their ships were primitive compared to the vast Harvester Armada. This would be a brief distraction before the feast continued. The Overmind was wrong. Admiral Vance stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the tactical display with narrowed eyes. The Harvester fleet was massive, over 3,000 vessels of various sizes, ranging from small fighters to enormous carrier ships the size of cities. They hung in orbit around Villana Prime, like vultures waiting for their prey to die. "Admiral, the enemy is moving to intercept," Commander Jackson reported. "They are forming a standard defensive formation." Vance smiled grimly. "They think this will be easy. They think we will fight like the Concord species, careful, defensive, afraid of casualties. Let us show them how humans fight. All ships, execute attack pattern Omega." The human fleet did not slow down or take defensive positions. Instead, it accelerated directly toward the enemy at maximum speed. Destroyer squadrons raced ahead of the main fleet, their weapons charging for close-range combat. The harvesters opened fire, and space filled with energy beams and projectile weapons. Human ships began to take damage immediately. The destroyer Valkyrie lost its port engine and began to spin out of control. On board the Valkyrie, Captain Maria Santos gripped her command chair as the bridge exploded around her. Half her crew was dead, her ship was crippled, and a harvester carrier loomed directly ahead. Any sane commander would have ordered a retreat. "All hands, brace for impact," Santos shouted. "Navigation, set collision course. If we are going to die, we are taking that carrier with us." The Valkyrie's remaining engines fired at full power, and the crippled destroyer slammed into the harvester carrier at tremendous speed. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire visible from orbit. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out again and again. Human ships did not retreat when damaged. They charged forward. Pilots ejected from destroyed fighters and used their emergency thrusters to reach enemy vessels, where they attached explosive charges to enemy hulls with their own hands. Marines in powered armor boarded harvester ships and fought through corridors filled with acid and razor-sharp appendages. The Overmind was confused. These creatures did not behave according to any known pattern. When wounded, most species retreated or surrendered. Humans fought harder. When facing certain death, most species begged for mercy. Humans laughed and made jokes about taking enemies with them. On the Harvester command ship, human Marines had breached the hull. Sergeant Michael Torres led his squad through the nightmarish interior, his armor covered in alien blood and acid burns. Around him, biomechanical horrors emerged from the walls, each one more terrifying than the last. "Contact front," Private Chun shouted, opening fire with her plasma rifle. Torres watched as 3 of his soldiers were cut down by harvester claws. He felt rage building in his chest. Not fear, not despair, but pure human anger. "You want to harvest us?" Torres screamed at the aliens. "Come and try. We are the apex predators of a death world. We hunted mammoths with sharp sticks. We aimed wolves in fire and the atom itself. You are nothing but bugs, and we are the exterminators." He charged forward with his combat knife when his rifle ran empty, stabbing and slashing at anything that moved. His squad mates followed him, screaming ancient war cries in a dozen languages. In space, Admiral Vance commanded the main assault. The Defiance had taken heavy damage, but it was still fighting. Around her, the bridge crew worked frantically, reloading power and coordinating attacks. "Admiral, we have lost 12 battleships," Jackson reported, his voice strained. "Enemy losses are approaching 50%, but they are adapting to our tactics." "Then we adapt faster," Vance replied. "Signal the reserve fleet. It is time for the Omega Protocol." From behind a nearby moon, a second wave of human ships emerged. These were not military vessels, but converted civilian ships freighters packed with explosives, mining vessels modified with military weapons. Thousands of volunteers had insisted on joining the fight, even though they had no military training. The Harvester Overmind experienced something it had never felt before. As it watched these fragile creatures throw themselves into battle with no regard for their own survival. As it calculated the mounting losses and the impossibility of victory, a new sensation spread through its vast consciousness. It was fear. Retreat. The Overmind commanded its swarm for the first time in 10,000 cycles. Disengage and retreat to safe distance. But it was too late. Human ships were everywhere, swarming the harvester vessels like angry insects. Admiral Vance had positioned her fleet to block all escape routes. "No retreat," Vance said coldly. "You came here to harvest innocents. You came here to feed on the helpless. Now you face predators, and predators do not let their prey escape. All ships, finish them." The battle raged for another 6 hours. By the end, only 17 human battleships remained operational. 18,000 human soldiers had died. But the Harvester swarm was destroyed. The survivors fled into deep space, broadcasting warnings in frequencies the galaxy had never heard from them before. They screamed of nightmares, of monsters, of creatures that smiled while they killed and refused to die when they should. Admiral Vance slumped in her command chair, exhaustion finally overwhelming her. Blood dripped from a wound on her forehead, and her uniform was torn and burned. Around her, the surviving crew wept with relief and grief. "Commander Jackson, status report," she said weakly. "The Harvester fleet is destroyed or scattered, Admiral. Vellana Prime is secure. We have won." Vance closed her eyes and thought of the 18,000 names she would have to memorize, the soldiers who would never go home. The families who would receive folded flags instead of their loved ones. At what cost? She whispered. But even as she grieved, she knew they had done the right thing. Below them, on Valana Prime, billions of lives had been saved. The Valani would survive because humans had chosen to fight. And across the galaxy, the legend of the Battle of Valana Prime would spread, the story of how the monsters of Earth had answered a cry for help and fought like demons to protect strangers. The universe had learned a terrible truth. Humanity was everything the galaxy feared, and so much more. The fires were still burning across Valana Prime when the first human shuttles descended through the smoke-filled atmosphere. Ambassador Kethra stood among the ruins of her capital city, watching the alien vessels land with a mixture of hope and terror. She had seen the battle from orbit. She had watched the human fleet tear through the Harvester Armada with savage fury. She had witnessed ships deliberately ramming enemy vessels, soldiers fighting with knives in bare hands, commanders laughing as they died. These were the monsters of Earth, and they were terrifying. What would they do now that the battle was over? Would they claim Valana Prime as their own? Would they demand payment for their sacrifice? Would they turn their weapons on the very people they had saved? The shuttle doors opened, and the first humans emerged. Kethra had expected warriors in blood-stained armor, fierce and dangerous. Instead, she saw exhausted men and women in medical uniforms, carrying boxes of supplies and equipment. They looked tired and sad, not triumphant. A human woman approached Kethra. She was tall and broad-shouldered, with silver hair and kind eyes. Her uniform identified her as Dr. Sarah Kim of the United Earth Medical Corps. "Ambassador Kethra?" the human asked gently. "I am Dr. Kim. We are here to help your wounded. Can you show us where the survivors are sheltering?" Kethra blinked in confusion. "You come as healers?" "We come as whatever you need us to be," Dr. Kim replied. "Right now, your people need medical care, food, and clean water. The fighting is over. It is time to save lives instead of taking them." Over the following days, Kethra watched the humans work with growing amazement. Thousands of soldiers who had fought like demons in space now walked through refugee camps with gentle smiles, handing out food and medicine. Engineers who had designed weapons of terrible destruction now used their skills to rebuild shattered power stations and water systems. The Valani survivors were afraid at first. They had felt the emotions of humans during the battle, the rage, the bloodlust, the fierce joy of combat. How could such violent beings be trusted? But the humans were patient. They moved slowly, spoke softly, and never raised their voices in anger. When Valani children cried at the sight of them, human soldiers would sit down at a distance and wait, sometimes for hours, until the children felt safe enough to approach. Private James Wilson, a young soldier who had killed 17 harvesters in hand-to-hand combat, spent an entire afternoon teaching Valani children how to play a game called Rock, Paper, Scissors. His squad mates, men and women who had watched friends die in battle, helped elderly Valani rebuild their homes. Kethra did not understand. These were the same creatures who had laughed while ramming their ships into enemy carriers. How could they be so gentle now? On the 7th day after the battle, Admiral Vance came down to the surface. She walked with a limp a harvester claw had torn through her leg during the fighting, and she had refused treatment until all wounded soldiers were cared for first. Kethra found her standing alone in the ruins of the Grand Temple, looking up at the broken crystal spires. The Admiral's face was wet with tears. "Admiral Vance?" Kethra approached cautiously. "Are you injured?" Vance wiped her eyes quickly. "No, Ambassador. I am just thinking about the soldiers we lost. 18,000 names. I will have to write letters to 18,000 families. I will have to explain why their sons and daughters and siblings and parents are never coming home. Kethra felt the Admiral's emotions wash over her empathic senses, and what she felt made her gasp. There was grief, deep and genuine. There was guilt, overwhelming and crushing. But underneath it all, there was something she had never expected to find in a monster. There was love. "You loved them," Kethra whispered. "You loved every soldier in your fleet." "Of course I did," Vance replied. "They were my responsibility. They trusted me to lead them into battle and bring them home safely. I failed 18,000 of them." "You saved billions of my people," Kethra said. "You came across the galaxy to save strangers. You sacrificed your own children for us." "Why?" Vance was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was tired but firm. "Because someone asked for help," she said. "Because we saw your people suffering, and we could not look away. Because that is what humans do." Kethra felt tears streaming down her own face. "The galaxy called you monsters. They quarantined you for 3,000 years. They told stories of your savagery to frighten their children. And yet you came when no one else would." "The galaxy was not entirely wrong about us," Vance admitted. "We are violent. We are dangerous. We carry rage in our hearts that would terrify most species. But we also carry something else. We carry compassion. We feel the pain of others as if it were our own. When we see innocents suffering, something inside us demands action." She turned to face Kethra fully. "We are monsters, Ambassador. But we are monsters who have learned to point our violence at those who deserve it. We are the nightmare that protects the dreamer. We are humanity, and we will never apologize for what we are." Kethra reached out and touched the Admiral's hand. It was warm and rough, calloused from years of service. This hand had commanded weapons that destroyed thousands of enemy ships. This hand had also signed orders to send doctors and food to refugee camps. "You are not monsters," Kethra said softly. "You are something the galaxy has never seen before. You are warriors with hearts. You are killers who weep for the dead. You are terrifying and beautiful and wonderful all at once." Vance squeezed her hand gently. "Then, perhaps it is time for the galaxy to update its definitions." Around them, human soldiers continued their work rebuilding, healing, comforting. They moved through the ruins like ghosts of mercy, bringing hope wherever they went. The Vellani survivors watched them with new eyes. These were not the monsters of legend. These were something far more complex, far more powerful, and far more worthy of respect. Word of what happened on Vellana Prime would spread across the galaxy. The story would grow with each telling, the tale of how the quarantined species answered a desperate plea and paid in blood to save strangers. And in the hearts of the Vellani, a new emotion took root. It was not fear, not gratitude, but something deeper and more lasting. It was love for the strange, terrible, wonderful monsters of Earth. 1 year had passed since the Battle of Vellana Prime, and the galaxy had changed forever. Ambassador Helena Vance, formerly Admiral Vance, now retired from military service, stood in the grand hall of the newly constructed Embassy of Earth. Around her, delegations from 47 different species waited to speak with humanity's representative. The building had been constructed on neutral ground, a small moon in an uninhabited system that had been chosen specifically because it belonged to no one. Human architects had designed it to be welcoming rather than intimidating, with gardens and fountains and spaces where beings of all kinds could feel comfortable. In the center of the main garden stood a monument that Vance visited every morning. It was a wall of black marble, 18,000 names carved into its surface in letters of silver. Above the names, an inscription read, "They gave their lives so strangers might live. They are the best of humanity." Vance touched the names gently, as she did every day. She knew each one by heart, their faces, their stories, the families they had left behind. She would carry them with her until she died. Ambassador Vance, the delegation from the Krix Empire has arrived, her assistant announced. Vance took a deep breath and straightened her diplomatic robes. The work was never finished. The galaxy needed so much help, and humanity had so much to give. The Krix were a reptilian species who had been enslaved by the Thorian Dominion for 500 years. When word of Earth's intervention at Valana Prime reached them, they had launched a desperate rebellion. Now they sought human assistance in their fight for freedom. Ambassador Vance, we have heard the legends, the Krix representative said, his scales shimmering with nervous energy. We have heard that humans will fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. We have heard that you are monsters who protect the weak. Is this true? Vance smiled. We are exactly what the galaxy has always said we are. We are violent and dangerous and terrifying. But we have learned to use our nature for good. If your people need help, we will help you. We cannot pay you, the Krix admitted. We have nothing to offer but our gratitude. Gratitude is enough, Vance replied. Humanity does not fight for payment. We fight because it is right. We fight because we cannot watch innocents suffer without acting. Tell us about your enemy, and we will tell you how we can help. Across the galaxy, similar conversations were happening every day. Oppressed peoples who had lived in fear for generations now had hope. Tyrants who had ruled without challenge now lived in terror. The word had spread through every system and every civilization. The monsters of Earth were listening, and they had decided to care. On Valana Prime, the reconstruction was nearly complete. The crystal cities gleamed once again under the soft light of the Valani sun. Children played in parks that had been built with human help. Schools taught a new history that included the story of Earth's sacrifice. Ambassador Kethra had become the leader of a new movement within the Galactic Concord. She traveled from world to world, telling the story of what had happened, not just the battle, but everything that came after. She told of human doctors who worked without sleep to save Valani lives. She told of soldiers who held frightened children until they stopped crying. She told of warriors who wept for enemies they had been forced to kill. They are not what we thought, she told the Concord Council. For 3,000 years, we feared them. For 3,000 years, we told ourselves that quarantine was necessary to protect civilized species. But we were wrong. Humanity is not a threat to the galaxy. Humanity is exactly what the galaxy needs. The vote to end the quarantine of Earth passed with a majority never before seen in Concord history. Only 7 species voted against, and even they did so reluctantly. On Earth, the news was celebrated with joy and relief. Humans had finally been accepted into the galactic community, not as dangerous animals to be contained, but as valued members of a larger family. But Admiral Vance Ambassador Vance knew that acceptance came with responsibility. She gave a speech on the anniversary of the Battle of Valana Prime, broadcast across Earth and across the galaxy. 1 year ago, we answered a cry for help. We did not know the Valani. We had never met them. But we heard their suffering, and we could not turn away. 18,000 of our sons and daughters paid the ultimate price for that decision. I will not pretend that I do not grieve for them every day. She paused, looking at the camera with eyes that had seen too much. But their sacrifice meant something. It meant that billions of innocents survived. It meant that a species was not wiped from existence. It meant that the galaxy learned that humanity is not just monsters. We are monsters with purpose, monsters with hearts, monsters who fight for something greater than ourselves. Her voice grew stronger. Now the galaxy has opened its doors to us. Species who once feared us now ask for our help. Oppressed peoples look to Earth for hope. This is not a gift, it is a responsibility. We must prove every day that the faith placed in us is deserved. She raised her hand in a gesture of promise. To the people of Earth, I say this. We are humanity. We are the apex predators on a death world who learned compassion. We are warriors who fight for peace. We are the nightmare that protects the dream. Let us go forth into the galaxy and show them what monsters can do when they choose to be heroes. The speech was broadcast across 1,000 worlds. It was translated into hundreds of languages. It became the foundation of a new era in galactic history. And in the dark places of the universe, where cruelty still reigned and evil still flourished, the oppressed whispered to each other. They shared stories of the monsters of Earth who answered when no one else would. They held on to hope that had never existed before, because they knew that somewhere among the stars, humanity was watching. Somewhere among the stars, the monsters who loved were ready to fight. And if they were brave enough to ask for help, the monsters would answer. The galaxy had been changed forever by a single act of compassion, by a single fleet that crossed the stars to save strangers, by 18,000 soldiers who gave their lives so others might live. And this was only the beginning. Humanity had taken its first steps into a larger universe. They had proven that violence and compassion could exist in the same heart. They had shown that the greatest monsters were those who fought against darkness. The story of Earth was just beginning, and the galaxy would never forget the lesson they had learned. When the innocent beg for mercy, the monsters of Earth will answer. Always.